Today, we're actually going to be talking about internal family systems therapy, which was basically an approach that was developed by Richard Schwartz, I believe was his name, in the 1980s. And just to give our audience a little bit of a background, IFS is basically a non-pathologizing and empowering approach to psychotherapy that is basically working with the multiplicity of the human psyche, right? It actually recognizes that the human psyche is composed of all of these different parts of ourself that are often competing really for sort of dominance of the total self in a lot of ways, which you'll get into in just a little bit. Oh, yeah. And basically what the work does is it teaches us to work with these parts of ourselves with greater self-awareness, greater self-compassion, and a greater sense of just general inner harmony. And really by helping individuals to work with and to understand these different parts of their personality, IFS is basically promoting both psychological health and wholeness, but also supporting sort of our ongoing growth and development through these stages of development, which I think is a really critical point here. So in today's episode, this is what we're going to be exploring, sort of the key concepts and the practices of IFS, the transformative potential that it has for us, and maybe even how it might be integrated with other therapeutic approaches and wisdom traditions that we like to talk about in integral spaces like these. So I look forward to hearing what you have to say about this today.
Well, great. Well, okay. First of all, what I'm going to do, I'm going to add on a little bit to what you said, give a brief description of IFS. Then I'm going to tell two stories. I'm going to tell the Richard Schwartz story. This happened. And then I'm going to tell the Keith story about how he ended up getting into IFS and getting interested enough to want to do this episode. Then I'm going to describe a typical IFS sequence. There's a series of loose protocols that he's developed, and there's reasons for the protocols, which is interesting in itself. And then I must talk about three cool things about IFS that are just super cool things. And then you and I can have a conversation about all that stuff, plus maybe about our different inner figures. Okay, so that's the plan that I have for today.
Love it. It's a good plan.
Dick Schwartz, he sees people as having four different kinds of interior figures. One is the wise self. The wise self is your wise self, my wise self right now are engaged in a turquoise dialectic. We're embodying a turquoise psychology right now. And the subtext of IFS is strengthening that self. And then there's three other kinds of selves. One are the exiles. These are the parts of us we want to get rid of. The selfish part, the shameful part, that kind of stuff. And then there's a couple of kinds of managers that manage these exiles, which feel bad and generate a lot of problems. One manager is the critic, which has a simple solution to the exile's problem: shut up or drop dead or something. That's the critic. Never good enough, something. And then you have the firefighters, which deal with the pain by distracting us away from it. We have a good solution to your pain. Let's get loaded. Let's have sex. Let's do that kind of stuff. And so IFS is working with these figures to create an integrating process that, as we all know, integration creates both horizontal and vertical growth. I'll get into more detail about these in a little bit. So Richard Schwartz, he came out of the 60s and the 70s. Now, in the 60s and the 70s, psychotherapy was going through this amazing divergence and convulsions of new systems just coming out. And the reason for this is that people have been doing behaviorism and psychoanalysis for 40 or 50 years, and they were sick of it because it just wasn't working that well. And not only that, the psychoanalysts were dismissive of the behaviorists, you white coat science assholes. And the behaviorists were dismissive of the psychoanalysts, you woo pseudo-spiritual Freudian bullshit people. Then out of the 60s and the 70s came the humanists, which said, your whole thing about medical model, diagnosing and treating symptoms, and all this other stuff, what about human transcendence? What about human potential? And also, we have a lot of other ways of relating to people that seems to make them feel good and help them feel better. And a subset of the humanists were the family therapists that were particularly true believers about family therapy, because they said, you guys dealing with individuals and psychological healing is ludicrous. We all exist in relationships. The relational context system is the main thing, particularly the family of origin, particularly developmentally. And so the family therapist said, you got to work with the family. And the family therapists were all widely divergent. There was the Virginia satir, all syrupy, we're going to love each other, yum, yum, yum stuff. We're all connected. There was J. Haley's strategic family therapy. You assign the couple to go home and at 7:15 have a fight, or they tell the kid who's bedding his bed, I want you to pee in the bed before you lie down and go to sleep. Strategic family therapy, paradoxical things. And there was structural family therapy by a guy named Salvador Minuchin. Salvador Minuchin noticed that if there's a family with parents that are coherent with each other, and they're in charge in an authoritative and fair and caring way, the identified patient or the kid that's having problems, usually a kid or somebody else, starts to get better. And also, Salvador Minuchin was a gifted therapist. He was very charismatic, used his own personal energy a lot in the work. And also, there was all this hostility going back and forth. All these zealots. I was talking to Jeff about this, and he said, zealots are what drive evolution, Keith. Zealots rub up against each other and new stuff comes out of it. He's right. And so Dick Schwartz didn't even study individual therapy and diagnosis and stuff. Personality disorders, give me a break. Like blah, blah. Like diagnosis, you can take your diagnostic manual and where the sun never, that kind of stuff, okay? He just learned family therapy and started doing it. As he did it, because he's a super smart guy and a gifted therapist, talented, had a lot of natural skill, Angela Duckworth, the grit lady, says that achievement equals skill times effort, and that skill equals talent times effort. So achievement equals talent squared. Okay, so Richard Schwartz had a lot of natural talent. And he started noticing that the people he worked with were talking about this part of me wants this part of me wants that, and so on. So he started diving into that. And of course, he was around Gestalt therapy and psychotherapy, all those people we've been always talking about different parts, parent, adult, child, inner child. This is just part of the zeitgeist. And so he developed his system, got very popular, was teaching it. Now, this isn't just for psychotherapy, everybody. This is for everything. This is for love, and this is for sex, and this is for parenting, and this is for development. This is for health. This is for death. This is for all the things that humans go through.